A native to an unknown Outer Rim planet, the man named Alec, who would become the most feared Sith Lord during the Jedi Civil War, had humble beginnings. Discovered to be Force-sensitive, he was taken for Jedi training at the Jedi Enclave on the Savannah world of Tatooine, where he would later befriend the legendary figure Revan. When the Jedi Council refused to become involved in the Mandalorian Wars, a splinter faction of knights led by Revan and Alec took up the mantle of leading Republic forces to hold back the tide. However, as the conflict continued, though many victories were obtained, Revan and Alec began to gradually become more bloodthirsty and ruthless, culminating with the activation of the mass shatter generator on Malachor 5, which led to the deaths of many Sith and Jedi. Chasing the Mandalorians into the unknown regions, they eventually discovered the rebuilt Sith Empire that had survived the Great Hyperspace War on Dromod Kaas. It was there they encountered the Sith Emperor, and thus their fall to the dark side was complete. Redubbed Darth, Revan, and Malak, they were sent out to locate the Starforge, an ancient war factory used by long-extinct Rakatan Empire. However, Revan and Malak rebelled against their Dark Master and incited to create their own empire, eventually culminating in the Jedi Civil War. When a Jedi strike team led by Bastila Shan boarded Revan's flagship in an attempt to capture him, Malak took the opportunity to seize the mantle of Dark Lord, firing on his master's ship and leaving him for dead. Fortunately, Revan survived, and the Jedi Council made the controversial decision to wipe his memory and retrain him as a Jedi. Revan and his party would eventually encounter Malak face-to-face aboard his ship, the Leviathan, where Malak, in an attempt to psychologically confuse and break his former master, revealed the truth about his identity and challenged him to finish what he started. Bastila Shan ultimately sacrificed herself so that Revan and his party could escape aboard the Ebon Hawk and track down the location of the Starforge in the orbit above the uncharted, unknown world, surviving several weeks of torture before finally committing herself to the dark side. Revan would eventually redeem Bastila and confront Malak for the final time aboard the Starforge, resulting in Malak's defeat and the Starforge destruction, thus ending the Jedi Civil War. However, these actions would be in vain as a new war would rise from the ashes, the return of the true Sith Empire and the sacking of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant.
The former teacher of the Jedi hero and eventual Grand Master Satele Shan, Caosian Durach served as a field agent during the years preceding the Great Galactic War, approximately 3,682 years before the Battle of Yavin. Likely by his own request, he was assigned to the orbital station above the ancient Sith homeworld of Korriban, instructing Padawan Satele Shan in the dangers of the dark side. When the Sith Empire emerged from their exile in the unknown regions and began their invasion of the galaxy, Durach and Shan were the first Jedi to cross blades with the Sith in over 300 years. While Shan would escape to warn the Republic, along with the Republic soldier Jace Malcolm and the intrepid smuggler Nico Okar, Durach stayed behind to cover their retreat, engaging the Sith pair Malgus and Lord Vindicant, managing to subdue Vindicant, but ultimately being defeated and slain by Malgus. However, Durach's sacrifice would not be in vain, and Shan would lead the Republic forces to victory during the recapture of Alderaan, besting Malgus during the battle and honoring her master's teachings during the subsequent Cold War and the signing of the Treaty of Coruscant. Don't look at me, this was Orange's idea. Due to the constant problems of transferring the files, the project had to be delayed multiple times, so I apologize for that. So here I am making my Versus Series debut as a collaboration. Special thank you to Gensarai1 for the inspiration, and a very special thank you to KingOrange for agreeing to help me with this. Orange's analysis of Darth Malak will draw from his main appearances in the KOTOR 1 video game and comic tie-ins where applicable, in addition to information from the Knights of the Old Republic Campaign Guide, the Knights of the Old Republic Strategic Guide, and the Dark Side Sourcebook, among others. My analyses of Battlemaster and Durach will be drawn from his sole appearance in the Return cinematic trailer, with background information pulled from the Old Republic Encyclopedia, the Journal of Nostaral, the Essential Guide to the Force, among others. Additional information on the overall setting and for both characters will be drawn from the Jedi Path, the Book of Sith, the Essential Guide to the Force, the New Essential Guide to Alien Species, the Essential Guide to Chronology, and the Essential Guide to Warfare, among others. With that out of the way, let us begin. Darth Malak versus Battlemaster and Durach. If these two swordsmen ever faced each other in combat, who would win?
A human male standing 6 meters in height, Malak's age during the Jedi Civil War and his defeat aboard the Star Forge were unknown, though I estimate his age to be in his mid-20s to early 30s. Malak was distinguished by a metal collar concealing what was left of his face, the result being an ill-fated duel with his former master Revan, who forcibly amputated the lower half of his face, leaving him permanently scarred and requiring vocabulator, forgive my mispronunciation, to speak properly. Physically, Malak was further distinguished by the scars from multiple surgeries, most notably the elongated spine, the result of experiments performed on him by Denegal during his time as a Mandalorian, POW. Malak was also experiencing the early stages of dark side degradation, most specifically the glowing yellow eyes and the pale skin complexion. However, these factors did not hold Malak back as a physical combatant, surprisingly. Addressing Malak's physical feats, his strength, agility, and economy of motion and stamina were highly refined, being able to hold his own against the strength-based power duelists and speed-based blitz fighters in battlefield engagements or pitched duels with other force wielders with no issue. And favoring relaxed postures and a one-handed grip in his fighting sequences. For armor, Malak took to wearing a tight-fitting dueling bodysuit, likely composed of armor weave, providing protection against vibro blades and blaster bolts, but against lightsabers it was utterly useless. Overall, while not a distinctively amazing physical specimen, Malak balanced all his attributes to meet the demands of combat, a warrior in mind and body.
and Durach was a Zabrak male of unspecified age, likely in his late 30s to early 40s. Indigenous to Iridonia, the Zabrak were a warrior race of humanoids distinguished by their cranial horns, the individual ceremonial facial tattoos, a second heart affording better control over their cardiovascular functions, and their intense discipline, making them one of the few species in the galaxy to be recruited as Jedi at a later age. Durach's physical capabilities were well regarded and allowed him to keep pace with the flow of the battlefield, favoring grounded footwork, acrobatic evasions for flanking and evading, and dexterity for the use of Jarkai techniques, most notably wielding Satil Shan's saber staff alongside his own weapon. For armor, Durach wore a full set of Jedi battle armor over his short-sleeved robes. The armor set included a full breastplate, backplates and gauntlets, greaves, and a codpiece. The armor was capable of resisting light blows from a lightsaber blade, though power-based strikes made it effectively useless. However, as showcased by his engagement with Vindicant and Malgus, his stamina was not infinite, and fatigue being the major factor as to him being bested by Malgus when he bulldozed through Durach's defenses by employing the strength-based Jarkai. In conclusion, Durach was a highly energetic and focused fighter, allowing himself to keep pace with opponents physically stronger and younger than he was by effectively dancing circles around them or simply outperforming them through attrition, waiting for the perfect time to slip in a lethal counter.
This conclusion is very simple. Malak is a powerhouse combatant, but while the metal collar concealing his wounds, if damaged, it would result in not a killing blow, it still represents a massive target that Durach can exploit.
Durach, on the other hand, is both physically stronger and agile than Malak thanks to his Zabrak physiology and his combat training focused on unbalancing an opponent through attrition, and his calmness under fire, as opposed to Malak's focus on overwhelming strength and agility. His stamina would not be an issue as he would be coming into this fight fresh. Both combatants are wearing comparable armor, but Durach's set provides him with a margin of error that Malak simply doesn't have. Chaos and Durach gets the advantage for physicality and equipment.
A veteran of the Mandalorian Wars and a feared physical combatant during the Jedi Civil War, often regarded by the director of KOTOR himself to be Revan's superior in terms of martial combat, Darth Malak wielded a standard lightsaber fitted with a red synthetic crystal, providing better cutting power at the expense of finance and handling. His fighting style was characterized by relaxed one-handed postures, acrobatic power attacks, and unpredictable cut and thrust attacks to bypass an opponent's guard and slip-in strikes. This emphasis on undermining an opponent strongly encourages the belief that Malak blended Forms 2 and Form 4 together, using them as a hybrid style in order to study Juyo with elements of 9-man thrown in for good measure. Form 2 Makashi was the dueling-centric form of lightsaber combat, emphasizing one-handed postures, unpredictable cuts and blade thrusts, and energy conservation. Form 4 Atalu, on the other hand, was an offensive style characterized by elaborate flourishes backed up by force-assisted acrobatics. Combined with the dual weapon training and physical techniques, Juyo was purely offensive form, pairing off jagged and unpredictable staccato blade work with pure unbreaded emotion in its movements, backed by heavy integration of force-assisted acrobatics. The result was a calculated trade-off. On one hand, Malak's technique blended two very incompatible fighting styles and compensated for the major weaknesses of both Makashi and Ataru. Blending of Makashi's relaxed postures and blade techniques with Ataru's elaborate acrobatics, with Juyo amping up his offensive output and allowing him to effectively bulldoze anyone adopting a defensive technique. And it was adept chaining force abilities into his sequences. But on the other hand, his commitment to offense meant that he would struggle when pressured into a defensive position, and had no response to the unorthodox. Malak was very much a static chess player, able to make use of all the assets at his disposal and playing well with all the cards he was dealt. However, rather than calling the fact that he could not win and retreat, his pride often forced him to stick it out and fight to the bitter end, even if it resulted in his own defeat. While his tactics on one-on-one duels and battlefield engagements mirrored that of Count Dooku, using shock and intimidation to cast doubt and fear into his opponents, a clear adherence to Sith Doom mock psychological warfare techniques, it also represented his lack of skill in other areas, specifically engaging multiple opponents or fighters with intense disciplinary training. In conclusion, Malak's technique, while simple and straightforward in design, was very intelligently constructed and best optimized for combating those who knew nothing of true skill and relied on stagnant techniques.
A veteran field agent, strong opposer to the dark side, and a great warrior in his own right, Battlemaster Chaos and Durach was a fluent and balanced combatant, able to mix and match techniques on the fly in order to keep his opponents off balance and constantly on their toes. His personal techniques incorporated elements from all disciplines, with Nyman becoming the culmination of all his skills wrapped into a single package rather than being his primary style. Whereas other Nyman specialists like Exar Kun, Darth Maul, and Darth Krayt used Nyman as their primary style and built off the benefits, stacking other disciplines associated with Nyman into their technique to create a balanced and highly unpredictable fighting technique, Durach used Nyman as the culmination of all other disciplines that he studied in order to be as unreadable and keep his options open in almost any situation, from battlefield engagements to pitched one-on-one duels. Armed with a standard lightsaber projecting a green plasma blade fitted in an Elysian gem, Durach's personal technique favored elements of films 3, 4, and 5, characterized by acrobatic evasions, active defensive counters, pushing slashes, and static blocks, backed up with heavy integration of force abilities and training in dual weapon combat, most notably wielding his apprentice's saber staff alongside his own when re-engaging Vindigan and Malgus. He also displayed skill in Trakata when he ignited the secondary blade of Satil Shan's saber staff into Vindican's chest, effectively disabling him. At the end of the day, what could be considered the greatest strength and weakness of Chaos and Durach's fighting style was that he balanced all the assets at his disposal to be effectively as completely unpredictable and difficult to pick apart as possible, stage managing his enemies with all his skills to keep them constantly on their toes and in a defensive position. However, none of these skills were advanced to the point where he could dominate them. His best chance would be to stage manage and evade rather than engage head on, where skill-based attacks would either be evaded or countered with a sharp block or pushing slash. Dedicated power strikes and brute strength would wear him down to the point where he would not be able to retaliate as effectively. Pattern dissection would effectively be a crippling weakness against him. He combined every discipline in his arsenal into a hybrid style and allowed him to handle anything thrown at him. However, it is very clear that he would experience major difficulty against those who enter the unorthodox.
Darth Malak and Chaos and Durach are two fighters placed in the same boat, in that they were able to hybridize forms and create styles that were both highly creative and practical and allowed them to engage multiple types of enemies.
However, where Malak's style focused on offense, using Juyo's emotional discipline to ramp up his output and effectively hammer opponents into submission, leaving defensive viability out on purpose, Durach's technique was based around an active defense, dancing circles around his opponent while actively exploiting gaps in their techniques to quickly disable or strike out in an exposed flank to keep opponents constantly in a defensive posture in order to whittle them down and force them to overextend, leaving them open for a devastating counterblow. Chaos and Durach gets the edge for martial prowess.
Primarily trained as a Jedi Guardian, Darth Malak focused on physical augmentation to answer the demands of battle. His study and training in the Sith arts rounded out his education, building an expensive arsenal of force abilities. Most force powers were divided into three categories: control, sense, and alter. Control abilities were directed inwards, strengthening and enhanced the body. Malak's expertise in this field were tied to force-based physical augmentation, allowing him to fight as a speed-based offensive blitz fighter, and most notably enhancing his endurance to survive Demeagle's experiments as a Mandalorian POW. Coming away with only surgical scars and an elongated spine. Other control powers included Kurosawa and Tutamenis. And while Malak has not mastered Force healing, he did perfect Dark healing, allowing him to feed off his rage to bolster and heal his body from injury. Tutamenis allowed a practitioner to absorb, redirect, or otherwise dispel harmful bursts of energy. Though a basic power, it was generally reserved for utility use, as its offensive applications were difficult to master. Although no evidence exists of Malak using Tutamenis in combat, given his facility with lightning, it is not out of the equation to infer he has this ability. Furthermore, there is a strong implication that Malak is capable of consume essence, allowing him to feed off the negative emotions of other force wielders to strengthen his own combat performance. Sense abilities were based around extending one's awareness into an environment and included force persuasion, projective telepathy, and fear-based powers. Malak's facility with the Jedi mind trick and telepathy specifically was such that his movements through the Force could be felt by others Force sensitives across the galaxy. Although he possesses no skill with projective telepathy or being able to hide his Force signature amongst other adepts, he was capable of breaking the mental discipline of Jedi, recruiting them as Sith followers, and was also capable of draining knowledge, allowing him to forcibly rip information from a target's mind, though only employed when tortured, captured prisoner. It demonstrates his skills as a telepath when analyzing Malak, both in-game and in terms of his skills as a telepath. His role-playing sheet credits him with immunity to fear effects, meaning powers such as Force Fear and Horror would be useless against him. Alter abilities were based upon altering objects in one's environment. The powers offered him were numerous. Alter abilities, specifically combative ones, were one of Malak's primary focuses. Telekinesis was one of the many powers that Malak was a master of, allowing him to unleash force waves capable of scattering large groups of enemies, and was skilled with telekinetic strangulation and lightsaber throws, and was an expert of chaining these powers into his lightsaber sequences. Malak has also proven that he can reliably penetrate the force barriers of other adepts. Though his telekinetic barrier was never tested, it is a fair guess to say that his barrier would be able to tank all but the most powerful force wielders. For energy-based powers, he was a master of safe, stable force lightning, and has used it both in live combat and as an instrument of torture. He has also mastered the force stun and stasis ability, allowing him to freeze targets by overloading their nervous system with force energy. In the fourth whirlwind, allowing him to lift targets off the ground and spin them rapidly. While neither power is lethal in and of itself, it's easy to see how an opponent would be disabled by this. His academic understanding and knowledge was also highly refined. The best example was his use of the Force-based technology of the Starforge, hooking up the Jedi POWs in artificially endured comas and parasitically feeding off their energy to strengthen his own, suggesting strongly that he was capable of force drain. Dedicating most of his powers to his offensive abilities, Malak wielded his powers with fluidity, creativity, and without restraint. However, there is no information of his defensive barriers. His total dedication to offensive abilities does mean if he encountered an opponent that could defend against his abilities, he would have nothing to fall back on when his powers failed him.
The general stereotype surrounding Battlemasters was the sacrifice of force ability variety and magnitude for more dedication into martial training. Chaos and Durach was one of the rare exceptions to this stereotype. As a combat specialist, force-based physical augmentation played a heavy role in his fighting style, allowing him to employ acrobatic evasions and keep pace with other trained force wielders. For the majority of this section, since there is no specific evidence as to the nature of Durach's force abilities, a great deal is going to be strong implication or speculation, so feel free to correct me. For control abilities, Durach as a combat specialist likely would have had knowledge of Guro Salva, although his appearance in the return trailer means he didn't likely use it frequently, and even though it is an extremely practical power, I wouldn't rule it out as part of his repertoire. He also possessed no ability with Tutamenis, preferring to absorb and redirect electric bolts with his lightsaber. For sense abilities, Durach was noted by Shan as possessing the power of foresight, allowing him to sense the incoming attack aboard the Korriban station and determine who the attackers were. Additionally, he was also able to remain calm in the face of the attack while the rest of the station's crew was in panic, suggesting strongly that he possessed immunity to fear effects and a passive battle mind, allowing him to improve his morale and combat performance. Alter abilities were Durach's most refined and varied field of force abilities. His telekinetic lifting strength was several tons, allowing him to throw multiple engine components with casual ease. He was also able to channel telekinetic surges into the ground, staggering opponents and keeping them off balance. And while his telekinetic barriers were never tested, a force wielder of his caliber would have most likely possessed a strong telekinetic barrier. Furthermore, he has also proven that he can reliably penetrate the force defenses of other adepts, such as when he hurled Vindicant across the Korriban hangar without seriously harming him, and was adept at chaining his force abilities into his lightsaber sequences, such as when he used a lightsaber throw to save Satele Shan's life from Malgus' killing blow. In conclusion, while it is not stated outright that Durach was a very powerful force wielder and his telekinetic barriers were never tested, he wielded his powers freely and in tandem with his martial skill, effectively able to handle himself with a small set of abilities.
Where Durach's lack of abilities put him at a serious disadvantage, the variety of telekinetic attacks at his disposal can be used to stage manage Malak. And although his lack of Malak's academic range and creativity, he is still able to contend.
Malak's true weakness as a force wielder is his total commitment to offensive powers, using them to quickly disable or overpower enemies, which is exactly the wrong approach against a fighter like Durach. Malak's lightning, while powerful, will get him nowhere, as Durach can still absorb and redirect the bolts with his lightsaber back into Malak's face, effectively stunning him and possibly chaining in a slash at his collar. Force Stun and Whirlwind would grant him nothing, as Durach would no doubt respond by immediately blasting Malak back with a telekinetic shove, ditto with Drain and telekinetic strangulation. But to his credit, Malak is the superior force wielder, not because of strength, but because of variety and academic understanding, though it is not an overwhelming advantage. Darth Malak gets the edge for force abilities.
Chaos and Durach and Dark Malak are easily two of the most renowned combats in their respective eras, only separated by 500 years in two video games. In both examples of highly performance combatants, tailored by creative ones in their use of the Force, the fight between these two would play out almost exactly like Durach's bout with Vindicant and Malgus, only Shan and Malgus are not the same pitcher, with Malak stepping in for Vindicant. Malak's dark side aura would most certainly catch Durach off guard, but given his display of calm under fire, it is safe to say that Dune Mach will ultimately work against Malak. When these two fighters clash blades, Malak will be attempting to probe and pressure Durach into overextending, while Durach would be maintaining an active defense, dancing circles around Malak and attacking his exposed flanks, forcing Malak to break off and use his force abilities to disable Durach.
However, his telekinetic attacks will be tanked by Durach's defenses, his lightsaber throws will be evaded, and his lightning will be absorbed and redirected back at him, along with a slash targeting his cybernetic collar. And although it wouldn't be a fatal blow, it would most definitely cause Malak to dig deeper and channel his rage. Where Malak would be attempting to overpower his foe, Durach would be dancing circles and actively countering, pressuring Malak into a defensive position, stage managing him with his X3 integrated powers and looking to exploit a gap in his opponent's technique by forcing him to overextend. Incapable of outperforming this foe and refusing to cut his losses and flee to fight another day, Malak would be forced to slug it out with Durach, and it would only be a matter of time before Malak ultimately crumbled under the pressure and would be cut down,
leaving the battered and bruised Durach left standing over the defeated foe.
As such, we declare KingOrange the victor.